The wind cut through my thin waitress uniform like ice-cold blades as I stepped out of Murphy's Diner into the Chicago night. 3:15 in the morning, and the streets were eerily quiet except for the distant hum of late-night traffic and the occasional siren wailing in the distance. My feet ached in my worn-out sneakers, the kind that had seen too many double shifts and not enough rest. The smell of grease and coffee clung to my hair and my skin, seeping into every fiber of my being after another grueling 10-hour shift. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders, knowing it would do little against the bitter February cold that seemed to bite through every layer I owned. The fabric was worn soft from too many washes. A pale blue that had once matched my eyes, but now looked faded and tired, just like everything else in my life. My fingers were already going numb despite being tucked deep in my pockets, clutching the meager tips from tonight, $43 and some change. Barely enough to cover the late fees on my electric bill, let alone groceries for the week. The alley between Murphy's and the old brick apartment building was my usual shortcut home. It cut 5 minutes off my walk. 5 minutes less time exposed to the bone-chilling wind that swept off Lake Michigan with vengeance. The narrow passage was dimly lit by a single flickering streetlight that cast dancing shadows across the grimy brick walls, creating an almost theatrical atmosphere that would have been beautiful if it weren't so lonely and dangerous. Halfway through the alley, I heard it. A soft, almost inaudible sound that made me freeze mid-step. Not quite a moan, not quite a sigh, but something distinctly human and filled with pain. My heart started beating faster, pumping adrenaline through my exhausted body as I strained to listen over the wind rattling through the fire escapes above. There it was again, coming from behind the large dumpster that sat against the far wall like a metal monument to urban decay. Every logical part of my brain screamed at me to keep walking. This was Chicago at 3 in the morning, in an alley that even the police avoided unless absolutely necessary. People got mugged, attacked, worse for stopping to investigate strange sounds in places like this. But my feet, seemingly operating on their own accord, carried me toward the sound despite my mind's protests. Maybe it was the exhaustion making me stupid. Or maybe it was the same instinct that made me become a waitress in the first place. The need to take care of people, even when I could barely take care of myself. Hello? I called out softly, my voice barely audible over the wind. Is someone there? Are you okay? The sound stopped. Complete silence except for the wind and my own heart hammering against my ribcage so hard I was sure whoever was there could hear it. I took another step forward, my sneakers crunching on broken glass and debris that littered the alley floor. The smell of garbage mixed with something else, something metallic and sharp that made my stomach turn. "Please," came a voice from behind the dumpster, so quiet I almost missed it. "Please, don't call the cops." It was definitely a man's voice, deep and rough with what sounded like pain or exhaustion, maybe both. There was something else in his tone and accent that wasn't quite American but wasn't fully foreign either. Italian maybe, or at least Italian-American. The kind of accent you heard in old movies about New York families and neighborhood restaurants where everyone knew everyone's business. Against every survival instinct the first possessed, I moved closer. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" "No ambulance," he said quickly, and I could hear the desperation in his voice now. "No cops, no ambulance. Please, just ... Just walk away." But I couldn't walk away. Not when I could hear the pain in his voice, not when someone clearly needed help, and I was the only person around to give it. I'd always been too soft-hearted for my own good, according to my mother, who spent most of my childhood warning me that my compassion would get me into trouble someday. Apparently someday was today. I rounded the corner of the dumpster and found him. He was slumped against the brick wall like a broken doll, one leg stretched out, the other bent at an awkward angle. In the dim light from the flickering street lamp, I could see he was wearing what looked like an expensive suit. Though it was now torn and dirty, stained with something dark that could only be blood. His white dress shirt was open at the collar, revealing a powerful chest and the glint of a gold chain around his neck. But it was his face that stopped my breath completely. Even in pain, even with blood trickling from a cut above his left eyebrow, he was absolutely beautiful. Not pretty or handsome in the conventional sense, but beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Sharp angles and dark shadows. High cheekbones that could cut glass, and the kind of jaw that spoke of strength and stubbornness in equal measure. His hair was black as midnight and disheveled, falling across his forehead in waves that my fingers itched to smooth back. But it was his eyes that truly captured me. Dark brown, almost black, like melted chocolate or rich coffee, and filled with a wariness that spoke of too many betrayals and not enough trust. Madonna mia, he breathed when he saw me, his eyes widening slightly. The Italian words rolled off his tongue like music, even in his current state. You shouldn't be here, Bella. This place, it's not safe for someone like you. Someone like me? I found my voice, though it came out smaller and more breathless than I intended. What's that supposed to mean? His lips quirked up in what might have been a smile if he weren't clearly in pain. Innocent, good, someone who actually cares about a stranger bleeding in an alley instead of walking away like a sensible person would. The wind chose that moment to gust through the alley with particular viciousness, and I saw him shiver despite trying to hide it. That's when I noticed he wasn't wearing a coat. Whatever had happened to him, wherever he come from, he was dressed for indoor weather, not a Chicago winter night. His expensive suit jacket was torn at the shoulder seam, and what looked like a bullet hole punctured the fabric near his chest, though thankfully it seemed the bullet had missed its mark. You're freezing, I said, stating the obvious but unable to stop myself. Where's your coat? Lost it somewhere, he replied, his voice tight with pain and cold. Along with a lot of other things tonight, without thinking, without considering the consequences or the stupidity of what I was about to do, I shrugged out of my jacket. It wasn't much, a thin, worn denim jacket that I bought at a thrift store 3 years ago and had been my only protection against the Chicago weather ever since. But it was warm from my body heat, and it was better than nothing. Here, I said, holding it out to him. Take this. He stared at me like I just offered him the moon. You can't give me your jacket, Bella. You'll freeze. I'm not the one bleeding and sitting on cold concrete, I replied, stepping closer and holding the jacket out more insistently. Take it, please. For a long moment he just looked at me. Really looked at me as if he were trying to memorize my face or understand some puzzle I represented. The intensity of his gaze made my cheeks burn despite the cold, made me suddenly aware of how I must look. Tired, worn out, with my blonde hair falling out of its ponytail and probably smelling like French fries and desperation. Why? He asked finally, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. Why would you help someone you don't know, someone who could be dangerous? Because you need help, I said simply. And because everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're hurt. Something shifted in his expression then, something that looked almost like wonder mixed with pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Slowly, as if he were afraid I might change my mind, he reached out and took the jacket from my hands. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I was shocked by how warm his skin was despite the cold, how calloused his hands were despite their elegance. Grazie, he murmured, slipping into Italian as he carefully put the jacket on. It was far too small for his broad shoulders, but he wore it like it was made of the finest silk. Thank you, Bella. You have no idea what this means. Sarah, I said impulsively. My name is Sarah, not Bella. His smile was real this time, transforming his entire face and making my heart do strange little flips in my chest. Sarah, he repeated, and my name sounded different on his lips, musical and important. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. I felt my cheeks burn even hotter at the compliment. Men didn't usually call me beautiful, especially not men who looked like him. I was ordinary Sarah Chen, the waitress who pulled double shifts and lived paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't the kind of woman who inspired poetry or grand gestures. I was the kind of woman who got overlooked, forgotten, taken for granted. What's your name? I asked, pulling my arms tighter around myself as the cold started to seep through my thin uniform. He hesitated for just a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Caution, maybe, or calculation. Luca, he said finally. My name is Luca. Italian? Italian-American, he confirmed. Third generation, but the famiglia still holds on to the old ways. Famiglia, family. Even I knew enough. Italian from movies and television to understand that word, but the way he said it made it sound like more than just relatives. It sounded like something bigger, more important, maybe more dangerous. What happened to you, Luca? I asked, gesturing to his torn clothes and the blood that was slowly drying on his forehead. Do you need me to call someone? A friend, maybe, or family? No, he said quickly, too quickly. No calls. It's better if no one knows where I am right now. The tone of his voice sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Whatever had happened to him tonight, whoever had hurt him, it wasn't over. I should have been scared. I should have made my excuses and gotten out of that alley as fast as my tired legs could carry me. But instead, I found myself sitting down on the cold concrete beside him, close enough to share what little warmth we had between us. Are you in trouble? I asked quietly. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes searching my face in the dim light. More trouble than you could imagine, Bella. And now, because you stopped to help me, you might be in trouble too. What do you mean? There are cameras, he said, nodding toward the mouth of the alley. Security cameras on the buildings, traffic cameras on the streets. If they review the footage, they'll see you here with me. They'll find out who you are. They? Who's they? But even as I asked the question, I realized I didn't want to know the answer. Whatever Luca was involved in, whoever was looking for him, it was the kind of trouble that ordinary people like me never encountered except in movies or the crime section of the newspaper. We sat in silence for several minutes, sharing the small shelter provided by the dumpster and the warmth of my jacket around his shoulders. I could hear his breathing, slightly labored but steady, and could smell his cologne underneath the scent of blood and fear. It was expensive, sophisticated, the kind of scent that belonged in boardrooms and fancy restaurants, not in dirty alleys at 3 a.m. You should go, he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. Get out of here before anyone comes looking. What about you? I can't just leave you here. I'll be fine, he lied, and we both knew it was a lie. I just need to rest for a few minutes, then I'll figure out my next move. You can barely sit up straight, I pointed out. How are you going to get anywhere? Do you even have a car? His silence was answer enough. I looked at my watch, a cheap digital thing that had stopped working properly months ago but still kept semi-accurate time. 3:45 in the morning. My shift at the diner was over. I had nowhere to be until tomorrow evening, and this man clearly needed more help than a jacket could provide. My apartment is 6 blocks away, I heard myself saying, as if someone else was controlling my mouth. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You could rest there, clean up, figure out what to do next. Luca's head whipped around to stare at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're offering to take a stranger to your home? Sarah, that's incredibly dangerous. You don't know anything about me. I know you're hurt, I said. I know you're cold. I know you need help, and I'm the only one here to give it. I could be a killer, he said, his voice deadly serious. I could be a thief, a rapist, someone who hurts women for fun. Are you? I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. No, he said without hesitation. I would never hurt a woman, especially not one who's shown me kindness. But Sarah, there are people looking for me tonight. Bad people. If they find me at your place, then we'll deal with that when it happens. I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. But right now you're bleeding and freezing, and I'm not going to leave you in this alley to die. For a long moment he just stared at me. I could see the internal war playing out across his features. Gratitude fighting with concern, desperation battling with honor. Finally, he nodded slowly. If you're sure, he said quietly. If you really want to help, I won't say no. But Sarah, I need you to understand, helping me might change your life. Once you're involved, even tangentially, things might never be the same. My life isn't exactly a fairy tale as it is, I said with a bitter laugh. Working double shifts for tips that barely cover rent, eating ramen for dinner more nights than not, falling asleep to the sound of sirens and gunshots. Maybe a little change wouldn't be such a bad thing. Something flickered in his eyes at my words, anger, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to struggle. No one should have to live like that, he said fiercely. Especially not someone like you. Someone like me again. You keep saying that. Someone good, he explained, his voice soft but intense. Someone who sees a stranger in need and doesn't hesitate to help. Someone who offers their only jacket to someone they've never met. There aren't many people like you left in this world, Sarah. I felt tears prick at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. It had been so long since anyone had said anything genuinely kind to me. So long since I felt like more than just an invisible waitress who brought coffee and cleaned up other people's messes. Thank you, I whispered. With considerable effort and a few muttered Italian curses, Luca managed to get to his feet. He was taller than I'd realized, probably close to 6 feet 3 inches, with the kind of build that suggested he spent time in a gym or doing physical work. Despite his injuries, he moved with a predatory grace that spoke of strength and confidence, the kind of man who was used to being in control of any situation. Are you sure you can walk? I asked, reaching out to steady him when he swayed slightly. His hand closed over mine on his arm, warm and strong despite everything he'd been through. With you helping me, Bella, I think I can do anything. The walk to my apartment took nearly 20 minutes instead of the usual 10. Luca's injuries were more serious than he'd let on, and several times I thought he might collapse right there on the sidewalk. But he kept going, leaning heavily on my shoulder and muttering what I assumed were Italian prayers or curses under his breath. My building was a rundown 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents generously called transitional. The kind of place where the heat worked sporadically, the elevator had been broken for 6 months, and half the mailboxes had been pried open by thieves looking for welfare checks or social security payments. I'd lived there for 2 years, ever since my last relationship had imploded and left me scrambling to find a place I could afford on a waitress's salary. 3rd floor, I warned Luca as we started up the narrow staircase. Think you can make it? Lead the way, he said, though his breathing was labored and I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. My apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone who worked in a diner and could barely make rent. Tiny, sparsely furnished, but meticulously clean. The living room was barely big enough for a secondhand couch and a small television that I'd found at a garage sale. The kitchen was a galley-style affair with outdated appliances and countertops that had seen better days. But it was mine and it was warm, and right now it was exactly what Luca needed. I helped him settle onto the couch, watching as he carefully removed my jacket and handed it back to me with reverent care, as if it were made of precious metal instead of worn denim. Thank you, he said again, his eyes meeting mine. For everything. Don't thank me yet, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Wait until you see what I can do with a first aid kit and some basic medical supplies. I'm not exactly a nurse, but I've watched enough Grey's Anatomy to be dangerous. His laugh was genuine, rich and warm like expensive whiskey, and it transformed his entire face. I trust you, Bella, completely. Those words hit me harder than they should have. When was the last time someone had trusted me completely? When had anyone looked at me the way Luca was looking at me now? Like I was someone worthy of respect and trust and maybe even admiration? I busied myself gathering supplies from my tiny bathroom medicine cabinet, antiseptic, bandages, cotton swabs, and a bottle of ibuprofen that was probably expired but better than nothing. When I returned to the living room, Luca had managed to unbutton his torn dress shirt, revealing a chest that made my breath catch in my throat. He was beautiful. There was no other word for it. His torso was a masterpiece of muscle and olive-toned skin, marked here and there with scars that spoke of a life more dangerous and complicated than I could imagine. A tattoo covered most of his left shoulder, an intricate design of roses and thorns intertwined with what looked like Italian script. On his chest, just over his heart, was another tattoo. Smaller, more personal, that appeared to be a woman's name in elegant cursive. Your girlfriend? I asked, nodding toward the tattoo as I sat down beside him on the couch. His expression darkened, pain flashing across his features that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. My mother, he said quietly. She died when I was 15. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. That must have been terrible. She was the only person who ever believed I could be something more than what my family expected, he said, holding perfectly still as I cleaned the cut on his forehead. She wanted me to go to college, become a doctor, or a lawyer. Something legitimate. But you didn't? No, he said simply. I didn't. There was a world of regret in those 3 words. A lifetime of choices and consequences that had led him to bleeding in an alley at 3 in the morning. I wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what had happened to the boy who had dreamed of being a doctor, but something in his expression warned me off. This might sting, I warned, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. He didn't even flinch, though I saw his jaw tighten slightly. You have gentle hands, he observed. Like a real nurse. I thought about it once, I admitted. Nursing school. But it cost too much money and I needed to work to help my mom with bills. What happened to that dream? I shrugged, trying to appear casual about the death of my ambitions. Life happened. Mom got sick, needed someone to help with her medical bills. Then she passed, and I had her debts to deal with. Dreams are expensive luxuries when you're trying to survive. His hand caught my wrist gently, stopping my ministrations. I'm sorry about your mother. And I'm sorry you had to give up your dreams. The genuine sympathy in his voice almost undid me. I'd gotten used to people treating my struggles as just part of life, nothing to be particularly sorry about. But Luca looked at me like my sacrifices mattered, like my dreams had value even if they never come to fruition. It's okay, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. I help people in my own way. At the diner, I mean, sometimes people just need someone to listen, you know? Someone to refill their coffee and ask how their day's going. It's not saving lives, but it's something. It's everything, Luca said fiercely. Kindness like that, caring like that, it's rarer than you think. Sarah, more valuable than most people realize. As I worked to clean and bandage his various cuts and scrapes, we talked. Not about the dangerous circumstances that had brought him to that alley. Not about whoever was looking for him, but about smaller things. He told me about his grandmother's garden in Little Italy, how she grew tomatoes and basil on a fire escape and made sauce that could make grown men weep. I told him about my favorite customers at the diner, the regulars who made even the worst shifts bearable with their stories and their tips. You grew up here? In Chicago? I asked as I wrapped a bandage around a particularly nasty cut on his forearm. Born and raised, he confirmed. Though I spent summers in New York with my father's family, they have business interests there. Business interests. Another phrase that sounded innocuous but felt loaded with meaning I didn't want to explore. What about you? He asked. Chicago native? Cleveland originally, I said. Moved here after high school, thought I'd make it big in the city. Turns out the city had other plans for me. The city can be cruel, he agreed. Especially to people who deserve better. By the time I finished patching him up, the sun was starting to rise outside my small living room window. Golden light filtered through the cheap blinds, casting everything in a warm glow that made the shabby furniture look almost cozy. Luca looked better too, cleaner, more alert, though I could see exhaustion pulling at the corners of his eyes. You should sleep, I said, gathering up the medical supplies. I'll take the bedroom, you can have the couch. Sarah, he said, catching my hand again, I can't stay. It's too dangerous for you. Where else are you going to go? You said yourself you don't have a car, and you can't exactly call for help. I'll figure something out. At least stay until tomorrow night, I pleaded. Give yourself time to heal, to make a real plan. What good is it going to do anyone if you collapse on the street? He studied my face for a long moment, and I could see the war between practicality and protectiveness playing out in his dark eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. One day, he said. I'll stay one day, and then I disappear from your life forever. You'll never see me again, never have to worry about any trouble I might bring to your door. Okay, I agreed, though something in my chest twisted painfully at the thought of never seeing him again. I left him settling onto the couch with a spare blanket and pillow and retreated to my tiny bedroom. But despite my exhaustion, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of him moving around in the next room. Who was he really? What kind of trouble was he in? And why did the thought of him leaving forever make me feel like I was losing something precious before I'd even had a chance to understand what it was? When I finally fell asleep, it was to dream of dark eyes and gentle hands, of Italian words whispered in the darkness, and the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in my life. I woke to the smell of coffee and something that smelled suspiciously like actual breakfast food, not the instant oatmeal or peanut butter toast that constituted my usual morning meal. Sunlight was streaming through my bedroom window, and according to my broken watch, it was nearly noon. Padding out to the living room in my pajamas, an old oversized t-shirt and flannel pants, I found Luca standing in my tiny kitchen, somehow managing to make it look smaller just by being in it. He'd found my spare clothes, a men's t-shirt and sweatpants that I kept from my last relationship and never bothered to throw away. They were slightly too small for him, stretching across his broad shoulders and chest in a way that made my mouth go dry. Good morning, Bella, he said, turning to give me a smile that made my heart skip beats. I hope you don't mind, I borrowed some clothes and made breakfast. You made breakfast? I stared at the scene before me in disbelief. Somehow he'd managed to create what looked like a legitimate meal from my sparse pantry. Scrambled eggs, toast that was actually golden brown instead of burnt, and coffee that smelled rich and perfect instead of the bitter brew I usually managed to produce. My Nonna taught me, he explained, sliding eggs onto a plate with professional efficiency. She said a man who can't feed himself is no man at all. Your grandmother sounds like a smart woman. She was. She also said a man who accepts help from a beautiful woman and doesn't repay her kindness is no gentleman. He held out a plate to me, our fingers brushing again as I took it. Sit, eat. The eggs were perfect, creamy, and seasoned with something that made them taste restaurant quality. The toast was crispy on the outside and soft in the middle, and the coffee was the best I'd ever had in my life. I ate in silence for several minutes, overwhelmed by the simple pleasure of a good meal that someone else had prepared. This is incredible, I said finally. Thank you. Prego, he replied, settling down across from me with his own plate. It's the least I could do. We ate in companionable silence, and I found myself stealing glances at him when I thought he wasn't looking. In the daylight, without blood and shadows obscuring his features, he was even more beautiful than I'd remembered. But there were details I'd missed in the darkness. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his current circumstances would indicate. The way he held himself with unconscious authority even while sitting in my rickety kitchen chair. How are you feeling? I asked when we'd both finished eating. Better, he said, rotating his shoulder experimentally. Much better, thanks to your excellent medical care. I'm just glad you're okay. I hesitated, then plunged ahead with the question that had been bothering me all morning. Can I ask what happened to you last night? Who hurt you? His expression grew guarded, the easy warmth in his eyes cooling to something more careful. It's better if you don't know the details, Sarah. Trust me on that. But you're safe now? They're not still looking for you? They're always looking, he said quietly. But they won't find me here. I made sure we weren't followed last night. Who's they? He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he reached across the table and took my hand in both of his. His palms were warm and calloused, strong enough to crush but gentle as they cradled my fingers. Sarah, he said carefully, there are things about my life, about who I am, that I can't share with you. Not because I don't trust you, but because knowing certain things can be dangerous. The less you know, the safer you are. But I want to know, I said, surprised by my own boldness. I want to understand who you are. No, he said firmly. You don't. Trust me, Bella. Ignorance is protection in this case. The endearment rolled off his tongue so naturally, like he'd been calling me beautiful his entire life. It should have annoyed me. I barely knew this man, had no reason to trust him, every reason to be afraid of him. But instead, it made me feel cherished in a way I'd never experienced before. Will you at least tell me your last name? I asked. Another long hesitation. Torino, he said finally. Luca Torino. The name meant nothing to me, but I could see it meant something to him. The way he said it like it carried weight in history and consequences I couldn't begin to understand. Italian, I said. Very Italian, he confirmed with a wry smile. My great-grandfather came over from Sicily in 1923, started a small business in Little Italy. The family has been in Chicago ever since. What kind of business? Import-export, he said, and I got the feeling that was all I was going to learn about the Torino family business interests. We spent the rest of the morning talking about safer subjects, movies we'd enjoyed, books we'd read, places we'd like to travel if money were no object. Luca was surprisingly well-read, with strong opinions about everything from classic literature to modern politics. He spoke 3 languages fluently and had traveled extensively throughout Europe, describing cities and cultures with the kind of detail that only came from personal experience. You're not what I expected, I said during a lull in conversation. What did you expect? I don't know, I admitted. Someone more. Rough, I guess. Uneducated. You talk like you went to college. I did go to college, he said. Northwestern, actually. Business degree with a minor in art history. Really? Really? I even wore a cap and gown, had my picture taken with the dean. My mother would have been proud. But you didn't become a businessman. Oh, but I did, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just not the kind my professors had in mind. As the afternoon wore on, I became increasingly aware of how comfortable I felt with Luca in my space. He moved around my tiny apartment with easy familiarity, as if he belonged there, as if we'd been living together for years instead of hours. When he offered to wash the breakfast dishes, I didn't protest. When he settled onto my couch to watch television, I curled up beside him without thinking about propriety or the fact that I was wearing pajamas and no bra. What do you usually do on your days off? He asked, his arm somehow ending up around my shoulders in a way that felt natural and right. Sleep, mostly, I said honestly. Maybe read if I can afford a book. Sometimes I walk down to the lake when the weather's nice. That's all. I don't exactly have a social calendar, I said with a self-deprecating laugh. Working double shifts doesn't leave much time for hobbies or friends. What about family? Boyfriend? No family left, I said. And no boyfriend. Turns out most guys aren't interested in dating a waitress who smells like French fries and can't afford to go anywhere more exciting than the corner deli. Their loss, Luca said fiercely, his arm tightening around me. Any man who can't see how special you are is an idiota who doesn't deserve you. You don't even know me, I pointed out. I know enough, he said, his voice soft but certain. I know you're kind enough to help a stranger, brave enough to bring him home, caring enough to patch up his wounds. I know you're beautiful inside and out, and strong enough to survive things that would break other people. I looked up at him, studying the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark eyes seemed to see right through me to something I didn't even know existed. Luca ... double quotes, Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as his free hand came up to cut my cheek. You have no idea how incredible you are. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. His face was so close to mine that I could feel his breath on my lips, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. My heart was beating so fast I was sure he could hear it, and every nerve in my body was screaming at me to close the distance between us. But then his phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the moment like a knife, and Luca jerked away from me as if he'd been burned. His phone, an expensive-looking device that had somehow survived whatever had happened to him last night, was buzzing, insistently from the coffee table where he placed it. "I have to take this," he said, his voice suddenly tense. "Sorry?" he answered on the third ring, speaking in rapid Italian that I couldn't understand but that sounded urgent and possibly angry. I caught a few words, "Esti, no, quando," but the rest was lost in the musical flow of his native language. After several minutes, he hung up and turned back to me, his expression grim. "I have to go," he said. "Now?" "But you said you'd stay until tonight." "Plans have changed." He stood up from the couch, suddenly all business. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. After I leave, I want you to pack a bag and go stay with a friend for a few days. Someone whose address isn't connected to you, whose name isn't in your phone or on any paperwork." "What?" "Why? Because last night, when you helped me, you were seen on several security cameras. My ... Business associates have access to facial recognition software. They might try to identify you, find out where you live." The blood drained from my face. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying it's a possibility," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "And I won't take chances with your safety." "But I don't have anyone," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "I don't have friends I can stay with. I work and I come home and I work some more. I don't have a social circle or people who would take me in." Something flickered across his face, anger, maybe, or determination. "Then we'll figure out another option." "We?" "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you goes against everything I've ever been taught about keeping business and personal life separate." He sat back down beside me, taking my hands in his. "But I can't walk away and leave you unprotected." "I won't. I don't understand. I'm going to arrange for you to be kept safe. Private security is somewhere they can't find you or hurt you." "Luca, I can't afford private security. I can barely afford groceries." "You don't need to afford it," he said. "I'll take care of everything." "Why would you do that?" "You barely know me." "Because you saved my life," he said simply. "Because you showed me kindness when you had no reason to. Because you're innocent in all this. And it would be my fault if anything happened to you." I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. "What exactly are you involved in that requires facial recognition software and private security?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he wasn't going to answer. "My family business," he said finally. "It's not the kind of business you read about in Forbes magazine, Sarah. It's the kind that makes enemies. The kind where people get hurt for crossing the wrong lines. You're in the Mafia," I said. It wasn't a question. "I prefer family business," he said with a wry smile that held no humor. "But yes, if you want to be blunt about it. And last night, someone tried to kill you." "Yes." "Because of this family business?" "Yes." I should have been terrified. I should have been running for the door, calling the police, putting as much distance between myself and Luca Torino as possible. But instead, I found myself thinking about the gentleness in his hands when he touched me, the way he'd made me breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world, the genuine concern in his voice when he talked about my safety. "Are you going to kill whoever tried to kill you?" I asked quietly. "That depends on a lot of factors," he said. "But Sarah, that's not your concern. Your only concern right now needs to be staying safe. And you really think they'd come after me? Just for helping you?" "In my world, Bella, information is power, and anyone who might have information becomes a target. You were seen with me, which means they'll want to know who you are and what you know." "But I don't know anything. They don't know that." The reality of the situation was starting to sink in. By helping Luca, by bringing him to my apartment, I'd somehow gotten pulled into a world of violence and danger that I'd only ever seen in movies. My quiet, ordinary life had just become very complicated. "How long?" I asked. How long would I need to stay hidden? Until the situation is resolved, he said. Could be days, could be weeks. I can't take weeks off work, Luca. I'll lose my job, fall behind on rent. I'll lose everything. No, you won't, he said firmly. I told you I'll take care of everything. Your rent, your bills, your job, whatever you need, I'll handle it. Why? I demanded. Why would you go to all this trouble for someone you met 12 hours ago? He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb stroking gently over my knuckles. Because in a world full of people who take and never give anything back, you gave without expecting anything in return. Because you looked at a bleeding stranger in an alley and saw someone who needed help instead of someone to be afraid of. Because ... Because what? Because I haven't met anyone like you in a very long time, Sarah. Maybe ever. And the thought of you getting hurt because of me is unacceptable. My heart was doing that fluttering thing again, making it hard to think clearly. This is crazy. Yes, he agreed. It is. I don't even know if I can trust you. You can, he said with absolute certainty. I swear to you on my mother's memory that I will never let any harm come to you. You saved my life last night and now I'm responsible for yours. Before I could respond, his phone rang again. This time, the conversation was shorter but more intense, with Luca's voice growing harder and colder with each word. When he hung up, his entire demeanor had changed. I have to go now, he said, standing up and moving toward my bedroom. Where are your suitcases? Luca, wait. Sarah, I'm out of time. My people are sending a car. You need to pack whatever you can't live without, and you need to do it now. The urgency in his voice cut through my confusion and fear. I followed him into my bedroom, watching as he pulled a small overnight bag from under my bed, one of the few possessions I'd managed to keep from my old life. Pack for a week, he instructed, his movements efficient and controlled. Comfortable clothes, anything you need for work, medications, whatever you can't replace. I can't just leave, I protested. I have a life here, responsibilities. Your life won't matter if you're dead, he said bluntly. Sarah, please. Trust me on this. Pack the bag. Something in his tone, desperation mixed with authority, broke through my paralysis. I began throwing clothes into the bag, my hands shaking as the reality of the situation hit me. This morning I'd been Sarah Chan, waitress, and nobody special. Now I was apparently someone worth protecting, someone whose life had value beyond serving coffee and cleaning tables. Where are you taking me? I asked as I packed my few valuable possessions. Somewhere safe, he said. A place where my family keeps important guests when they need protection. Important guests? People who matter to the family. People who are under our protection for whatever reason. And matter to your family? He turned to look at me, his dark eyes intense and unreadable. You matter to me. Which means you matter to them. A car horn honked outside, sharp and impatient. Luca went to the window and looked down at the street, then turned back to me with increased urgency. Time to go, he said. Are you ready? I looked around my tiny apartment at the second-hand furniture, the cheap decorations. The life I'd built from nothing and was now abandoning for reasons I didn't fully understand. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Sarah, Luca said softly, coming to stand beside me. I know this is scary. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I promise you, I will make this right. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I will keep you safe and I will fix this. And then what? I asked. After it's fixed, after the danger is over, what happens to me? Then you get your life back, he said. Better than before, I promise you that. What about you? Do you get your life back too? His smile was sad and knowing. My life is what it is, Bella. It was decided for me a long time ago. But yours ... Yours can be anything you want it to be. The car honked again, longer this time. Luca grabbed my bag and headed for the door, then turned back when he realized I wasn't following. Sarah, he said gently. Come with me. It wasn't a command. It was a request, an invitation to step into something unknown but possibly wonderful. I thought about my predictable life, my quiet existence, a loneliness that followed me home every night from the diner. Then I thought about the way Luca looked at me, like I was precious and worth protecting. I followed him out the door. The car waiting downstairs was exactly what I'd expected from a Mafia boss, a large, black sedan with tinted windows and the kind of pristine exterior that suggested it was worth more than I made in 5 years. A man in an expensive suit and sunglasses held the back door open for us, his expression carefully neutral but his posture screaming danger. "Anthony," Lucas said by way of greeting as we approached the car. "Boss," the man replied, his voice gravelly and marked with the same Italian-American accent as Luca's. "Everything's arranged." "Good, Sarah. This is Anthony Benedetto, my assistant. Anthony, this is Sarah Chen. She's under family protection now." Anthony's expression didn't change, but I caught him looking me over with the kind of assessment that made me feel like he was cataloging every detail about me for future reference. "Ma'am," he said politely, holding the car door open wider. The interior of the car was even more luxurious than the exterior, leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a built-in bar, and what looked like a small television screen. But what caught my attention was the glass partition between the front and back seats, and the way Anthony kept checking his mirrors as we pulled away from my building. "Are we being followed?" I asked Luca quietly. "Not anymore," he said, his hand finding mine and squeezing reassuringly. "Anthony is very good at his job." "Which is what, exactly?" "Keeping me alive," Luca said simply. We drove through Chicago in silence for a while, heading away from my familiar neighborhood toward parts of the city I'd never seen before. The buildings grew larger and more expensive, the streets cleaner and wider. This was the Chicago of money and power, where people like me didn't usually venture except maybe to clean the offices or serve the food. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled up to what looked like a luxury hotel in the heart of downtown. "The Palazzo," Lucas said. "It's one of our properties." "You'll be safe here." "Our properties?" The family owns several hotels, restaurants, legitimate businesses throughout the city, he explained as Anthony came around to open our door. "This is one of the nicer ones." The lobby of the Palazzo was like stepping into a different world. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Fresh flowers filled the air with their perfume, and everything spoke of money and taste and old-world elegance. The staff moved with quiet efficiency, greeting Luca with the kind of respect that spoke of both familiarity and fear. "Mr. Torino," the concierge said, appearing at Luca's elbow almost instantly. "Your usual suite is ready." "Grazie, Marco. This is Miss Chen. She'd be staying in the adjoining room, and she's to have anything she needs. Anything at all." "Of course, sir." "Welcome to the Palazzo, Miss Chen." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent except for the soft jazz music playing overhead. I caught myself staring at Luca's profile, at the way he carried himself with unconscious authority even here, surrounded by luxury that clearly belonged to him. This was his world, power and money and people who jumped to fulfill his every request. "Luca," I said as we stepped off the elevator into a hallway that looked like something from a magazine. "This is too much. I can't stay somewhere like this." "Why not?" "Because I don't belong here. Because this probably costs more per night than I make in a month. Because I'm nobody special." He stopped walking and turned to face me, his hands coming up to frame my face. "Sarah," he said firmly, "you are somebody very special. You just don't know it yet." Before I could protest further, he was leading me down the hallway to a door marked with a brass plaque that read Penthouse Suite. He slid a key card, threw the lock, and gestured for me to enter first. If the lobby had been impressive, the penthouse suite was overwhelming. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, while the interior was decorated with obvious attention to detail and unlimited budget. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, original artwork hung on the walls, And everything from the furniture to the fixtures spoke of custom design and expensive taste. "This is your room," Lucas said, leading me through a connecting door into an equally impressive but slightly smaller suite. "You have your own bathroom, your own sitting area, your own view. Room service is available 24 hours, and there's a spa and fitness center on the 10th floor if you're interested." "Luca," I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. "Before you say it's too much again, let me explain something to you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "In my world, protection means complete protection. It means safe accommodations, comfortable surroundings, and everything you need to live well while we resolve the situation that put you in danger. This isn't charity, Sarah. This is responsibility." "Whose responsibility?" "Mine," he said simply. "You're under my protection now, which means your well-being is my personal obligation. And I take my obligations very seriously." A knock at the door interrupted us. Luca opened it to admit two women carrying armloads of clothing, shoes, and shopping bags from stores I recognized from magazines but had never been able to afford. "I took the liberty of having some things brought up," Luca explained as the women began laying out their purchases on the bed. "I noticed you didn't pack much, and I thought you might need a few extra options." I stared at the clothes in amazement, beautiful things in my exact size. From casual wear to what looked designer dresses that probably cost more than my car. "How did you know my size?" "Lucky guess," he said with a smile that suggested it hadn't been a guess at all. "This is too much," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "I can't accept all this." "You're not accepting it," he corrected. "You're borrowing it. When this is over, when you're safe and back to your regular life, you can return whatever you don't want to keep." The women finished their arrangements and left us silently as they'd arrived, leaving me alone with Luca and more luxury than I'd ever seen in one place. "I don't understand any of this," I said, sinking down onto the edge of the bed. 12 hours ago, I was nobody. Now I'm in a penthouse suite with designer clothes and a mafia boss telling me I matter. It doesn't make sense. Luca sat down beside me, careful to maintain some distance between us. "Sometimes life doesn't make sense," he said quietly. "Sometimes things happen that change everything in ways we never expected. Is that what I am? Something that happened to change everything?" He turned to look at me, his dark eyes serious and searching. "I think you might be," he said honestly. "I think you might be exactly that." Before I could ask what he meant, his phone rang again. This time, when he answered, his entire body went rigid. "Quando?" he asked sharply. "How many?" A pause. "No, keep her here, double the security." "I'll be down in 5 minutes." He hung up and turned to me, his expression grim. "Sarah, I need to go handle some business. You're to stay here in this room until I get back." "What's wrong?" "Someone just tried to break into your apartment," he said. "They were looking for you." The blood drained from my face. "They found me that quickly?" "They found where you live," he corrected. "But they didn't find you because you're here with me, which is exactly where you're going to stay. How long will you be gone?" "A few hours, maybe longer." "But Sarah, you'll be completely safe here. There are guards on this floor, cameras everywhere, and no one gets up here without my permission. What if something happens to you?" Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or something warmer. "Are you worried about me, Bella?" "Yes," I admitted. "I am." He leaned closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek again. "Then I'll be extra careful," he said softly. "Because I have something very precious waiting for me to come back." This time, when he started to pull away, I didn't let him. My hand caught his wrist, holding him close, and before I could lose my nerve, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, but the effect was electric. Luca went perfectly still for a moment, then his arm came around my waist, pulling me closer as he deepened the kiss. He tasted like coffee and something uniquely him, and when his tongue touched mine, I felt like every nerve in my body had suddenly come alive. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "Sarah," he whispered, resting his forehead against mine. Be careful, I said. Come back to me. Always, he promised, pressing one more soft kiss to my lips. I'll always come back to you. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the most beautiful room I'd ever seen, wearing yesterday's clothes and wondering how my life had become something out of a movie. I spent the next hour exploring my temporary home, marveling at details like the marble bathroom with its sunken tub and separate shower, the walk-in closet that was bigger than my bedroom back home, and the sitting area with its view of Lake Michigan stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The clothes Luca had ordered for me were beautiful, well-made pieces in colors and styles that somehow perfectly suited me despite the fact that he'd known me for less than a day. I tried on a few items, amazed by how different I looked in expensive clothes that actually fit properly. The woman in the mirror didn't look like a tired waitress anymore. She looked like someone who belonged in places like this, someone worthy of protection and designer dresses. Room service arrived without my ordering anything. Apparently, Luca had left instructions for them to bring me lunch. The meal was unlike anything I'd ever eaten. Perfect pasta with sauce that tasted like it had been simmering for hours, bread that was still warm from the oven, and a glass of wine that probably cost more than I usually spent on food in a week. As I ate, I tried to process everything that had happened. Yesterday at this time, I'd been getting ready for another shift at Murphy's Diner, worried about my electric bill and whether I could afford groceries this week. Now I was sitting in a penthouse suite, under the protection of a man who could apparently afford to dress me in designer clothes and house me in luxury hotels without thinking twice about the cost. Luca Torino. Even his name sounded dangerous and exotic, like something from a romance novel. But he wasn't fictional, he was real and complex, and somehow he decided I was worth protecting. The way he looked at me, touched me, spoke to me ... It was like he saw something in me that I'd never seen in myself. The afternoon stretched on with no word from Luca. I tried to read one of the magazines that had been thoughtfully provided, tried to watch television, tried to nap. But my mind kept racing, wondering what he was doing, whether he was safe, what exactly was happening in the dangerous world he inhabited. Around 6 in the evening, there was a soft knock at my door. I opened it expecting to see Luca, but instead found a woman about my own age with elegant features and the kind of effortless style that spoke of money and good breeding. Sarah? She said with a warm smile. I'm Valentina Torino, Luca's cousin. May I come in? I stepped back to allow her entry, studying her as she moved into the room with the same unconscious grace I noticed in Luca. She was beautiful in an understudied way, with dark hair pulled back in a perfect chignon and clothing that probably cost more than most people's cars. Luca asked me to check on you, she explained, settling gracefully onto one of the chairs in the sitting area. He's still handling the situation with the people who tried to break into your apartment, but he wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't sure that was entirely true. Thank you for coming. Actually, I was hoping we could talk, Valentina said. About Luca, about our family, about what you've gotten yourself into. I'm not sure I understand. Valentina studied me for a moment, her dark eyes so similar to Luca's, assessing and intelligent. How much has he told you about who we are, about what we do? Not much, I admitted. Just that it's a family business and that it's dangerous. That's very like him, she said with a small smile. Always trying to protect people from the truth, even when the truth might be helpful. What truth? The truth about the Torino family, about the responsibilities that come with our name, about why Luca takes protection so seriously. She leaned forward slightly. May I ask you something personal, Sarah? I nodded, curious despite myself. Do you care about him? My cousin, I mean. Do you have feelings for him? The question caught me off guard. I barely know him. That's not what I asked, Valentina said gently. I asked if you care about him. I thought about the way my heart raced when Luca looked at me, about the safety I felt in his presence, about the kiss we'd shared before he left. Yes, I said quietly. I think I do. Good, Valentina said, settling back in her chair. Because he cares about you too. More than I've ever seen him care about anyone, actually. Which is why I think you deserve to understand what you're dealing with. I'm listening. The Torino family has been in Chicago for almost 100 years, she began. We came here with nothing but determination and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. Over the decades, we've built an empire: restaurants, hotels, import businesses, construction companies. Most of it is completely legitimate. And the rest? The rest is what keeps the legitimate businesses safe, she said diplomatically. Protection, information, influence. The kind of services that can't be advertised in the yellow pages. You're talking about the Mafia. I'm talking about family, she corrected. About loyalty and tradition and taking care of the people who matter to us. But yes, if you want to use that word, then that's what we are. And Luca? Luca is being groomed to take over the family business eventually, Valentina said. He's smart, capable, respected by the other families. But he's also different from the men who came before him. How? He has a conscience, she said simply. He questions things that previous generations never questioned. He tries to keep the family moving toward legitimacy, toward a future where his children won't have to look over their shoulders. Is that why someone tried to kill him? Valentina's expression grew serious. There are people who don't want change, who profit from keeping things the way they've always been. Luca's vision for the future threatens their interests, so they tried to eliminate him. They tried, she said with a slight smile that reminded me strongly of Luca. They failed. And now they have a much bigger problem than they started with. What do you mean? They involved an innocent, Valentina explained. In our world, there are rules about civilians, about people who aren't part of the life. When they decided to target you to get to Luca, they crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. What happens now? Now the full weight of the Torino family comes down on them, she said matter-of-factly. And trust me, Sarah, that's not something they'll survive. I absorbed this information. Trying to reconcile the violent world Valentina was describing with the gentleman who had made me breakfast and kissed me like I was precious. Are you trying to scare me? I asked. I'm trying to prepare you, she said. Because if you're going to be in Luca's life, and I think you are, then you need to understand what that means. It means luxury and protection and never having to worry about money again. But it also means danger and secrets and accepting that the man you care about sometimes has to do things that normal people would find unforgivable. What kind of things? The kind of things that keep the people he loves safe, Valentina said softly. The kind of things that ensure nobody ever hurts his family again. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of her words settling over me like a heavy blanket. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler. I can see that you're overwhelmed, she said. And I understand that. But Sarah, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Luca isn't the only one who's decided to protect you. You're family now, which means you're everyone's responsibility. Family? The moment Luca brought you under our protection, you became part of us, she explained. That's how it works. We don't do things halfway. A keycard chirped in the lock and both women turned toward the door as Luca entered. He looked tired but unharmed. His expensive suit slightly wrinkled and his hair mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw Valentina, his expression grew wary. Val, he said carefully, what are you doing here? Introducing myself to your Sarah, she said with an innocent smile that fooled no one. We've been having a lovely chat about family traditions and future planning. Luca's eyes flicked to me, concern and something that might have been panic crossing his features. What exactly did you tell her? Nothing she didn't need to know, Valentina said, rising gracefully from her chair. And nothing that will change how she feels about you if that's what you're worried about. Val ... She's good for you. Cugino, Valentina said, switching to what I assumed was the Italian word for cousin. Don't let fear make you stupid. She kissed both of Luca's cheeks in the European fashion, squeezed my hand gently, and glided out of the room like the elegant woman she was. Luca stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her go, then turned his attention to me. "How much of our family history did my cousin share with you?" "Enough," I said. "Are you angry?" "No," he said, moving to sit beside me on the couch. "Worried, maybe. Concerned that you might decide this is all too much to handle." "Is it going to get worse?" "Probably," he said honestly. "At least in the short term." "Sarah, the people who came after you today weren't just looking for information. They were planning to take you, use you as leverage against me. But they didn't find me. No, they didn't, and they won't because you're under family protection now." "But Bella, I need you to understand what that means." "It means this isn't temporary anymore. It means you can't go back to your old life, at least not the way it was." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your safety is now permanently tied to mine," he said quietly. "I'm saying that Murphy's diner and your tiny apartment and worrying about electric bills, that life is over. You're talking like I don't have a choice in the matter." "You do have a choice," he said, taking my hands in his. "You can choose to trust me, to let me take care of you, to build something new and better than what you had before, or ... or what? Or I can arrange for you to disappear. New identity, new city, enough money to start over wherever you want to go. You'll be safe, but you'll be alone." The thought of leaving, of never seeing Luca again, sent a sharp pain through my chest. "And if I choose the first option?" "Then you choose me," he said simply. "You choose this family, this life, everything that comes with it. The good and the bad, the luxury and the danger. Luca, we barely know each other." "I know," he said. "Which is why I'm not asking for an answer right now. I'm asking you to give us time to figure out what this is, what it could become." "How much time?" "As long as you need," he promised. "But Sarah, while you're deciding, you need to stay here. You need to let me protect you." "What happened today?" "With the people who broke into my apartment?" His expression grew cold, all warmth leaving his features. "They won't be breaking into anyone else's apartment. You killed them." "I defended what's mine," he said without apology. "And make no mistake, Bella, you're mine to protect now." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through my body in a way that was entirely inappropriate given the circumstances. "Luca, I know it's a lot," he said, his voice gentling again. "I know this isn't what you signed up for when you offered me your jacket. But Sarah, I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever you decide, you'll always be safe." "That's not negotiable. What if I decide I can't handle this life? What if I choose to disappear?" Pain flashed across his features so quickly I almost missed it. "Then I'll let you go," he said. "But I'll never stop making sure you're protected. Even if you never see me again?" Even then, the sincerity in his voice, the genuine care and concern in his dark eyes, made my heart ache. When was the last time anyone had cared about my well-being the way Luca seemed to? When had anyone ever been willing to sacrifice their own happiness to ensure mine? "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," he said, pulling me closer until I was curled against his side. "Being scared is smart. This world, my world, it's dangerous and complicated and sometimes ugly. But Sarah, I swear to you, as long as you're with me, nothing will hurt you." "Promise?" "I promise," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "On everything I hold sacred, I promise." We sat together as the sun set outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. I thought about my old life, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the constant struggle to make ends meet. Then I thought about Luca's hands in my hair, his voice calling me Bella, the way he looked at me like I was something precious. "Can I ask you something?" I said quietly. "Anything." "The tattoo on your chest, over your heart. Your mother's name." "Tell me about her." His arm tightened around me, and for a moment I thought he wasn't going to answer. "Maria Torino," he said finally. She was extraordinary. Beautiful, intelligent, strong enough to stand up to my father when she thought he was wrong. How did she die? Cancer, he said quietly. She fought it for 2 years, but in the end, he shrugged, but I could hear the old pain in his voice. I'm sorry. She would have liked you, he said suddenly. She always said the measure of a person wasn't how they treated people who could help them, but how they treated people who couldn't. You helped a stranger who couldn't give you anything in return. She would have respected that. What did she want for you? Before she got sick, what kind of life did she imagine you'd have? Something different, he said with a bitter laugh. She wanted me to go to medical school, become a doctor. She had this vision of me saving lives instead of Well, instead of what I do now. It's not too late, I said impulsively. You're still young, you're obviously intelligent. You could still become a doctor if that's what you wanted. No, he said firmly. My path was decided the day I was born a Torino. There's no changing that now. But what if there was? What if you could choose a different life? He looked down at me, his dark eyes serious and sad. Are you asking hypothetically, or are you asking if I give up everything for the right woman? My heart skipped a beat. I don't know. Both, maybe. Then the answer is yes, he said quietly. For the right woman, I'd find a way to build something different. Something better, even if it meant giving up power, money, everything you've known. Sarah, he said, his voice so soft I had to strain to hear it. I've had power and money my entire life, but I've never had peace. I've never had someone who looked at me and saw something worth loving instead of something to fear or use. Is that what you think I see? I think you see the man I could be instead of the man I am, he said. And that's more precious to me than all the power in the world. Before I could respond, room service knocked again. This time they wheeled in an entire dining cart laden with enough food for 6 people and antipasti, fresh bread, multiple pasta dishes, wine, and desserts that looked like works of art. I thought you might be hungry, Luca explained, helping me to the small dining table that overlooked the city. And I wanted our first real dinner together to be special. Our first real dinner? Breakfast doesn't count, he said with a smile. That was necessity. This is choice. The food was incredible, but what I noticed most was the way Luca served me before himself. The way he made sure my wine glass was never empty. The way he listened to every word I said as if it were important. He asked me about my childhood, my dreams, the books I'd read, and the movies I'd loved. In return, he told me stories about growing up in a family where tradition and loyalty were everything. About the weight of expectations and the burden of a name that meant something in certain circles. Do you ever wish you'd been born into a normal family? I asked as we shared a dessert that tasted like heaven on a plate. Every day, he said without hesitation. But then I think about how my life led me to you, and I can't bring myself to regret it entirely. Even with all the danger? All the violence? Even with all of that, he said. Because without it, I would never have been in that alley last night. I never would have met the woman who gave me her jacket and possibly saved my life in more ways than one. What do you mean? I mean, I was losing myself, Sarah, becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone my mother wouldn't have been proud of, but you ... You reminded me that there's still good in the world. That kindness still exists. I'm not that special. Luca, I'm just someone who couldn't walk away from someone in need. That's what makes you special, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. In a world where most people would have kept walking, you stopped. You cared. After dinner, we moved back to the couch, and I found myself curled up against Luca's side again. It felt natural, right? Like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. What happens tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow we start figuring out the future, he said. Tomorrow I introduce you to the rest of the family, show you more of our world, help you understand what your options really are. And if I decide I can't handle it, then we'll deal with that too, he said. But Sarah, I hope you'll give us a chance. Give me a chance. To do what? To show you that this life, dangerous as it is, could also be wonderful. To prove to you that you're worth every luxury, every protection, every kindness I can give you. I tilted my head up to look at him, studying the strong lines of his face and the soft lamplight. Why me, Luca? You could have any woman you wanted. Why are you so determined to take care of someone you barely know? Because, he said, his hand coming up to stroke my cheek, in 35 years of life, you're the first person who's ever made me want to be better than I am. You're the first woman who's looked at me and seen something worth saving. I do see that, I whispered. I see someone who makes me feel safe and precious and maybe even beautiful. You are beautiful, he said fiercely. Inside and out, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. This time, when he leaned down to kiss me, I was ready for it. I met him halfway, my arms sliding around his neck as his mouth moved against mine with gentle hunger. He tasted like wine and possibilities, and when his tongue touched mine, I felt like every nerve ending in my body had suddenly come alive. Sarah, he whispered against my lips, and my name sounded like a prayer. Stay with me tonight, I said impulsively. Don't go back to your room. Stay here. He pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes searching my face. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. I don't want to be alone, and I don't want you to leave. I won't leave, he promised. I'll stay as long as you want me to. What about forever? Would you stay forever? Forever is a long time, Bella, he said softly. But yes, if you'd have me, I'd stay forever. As we settled into bed together, Luca in his clothes, me in one of the silk nightgowns that had mysteriously appeared among the purchased clothing, I thought about how completely my life had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, I'd been alone in the world, struggling to survive on tips and determination. Tonight, I was falling asleep in the arms of a man who looked at me like I hung the moon and promised to protect me from anything that might try to hurt me. Luca? I whispered in the darkness. Steve, Bella? Thank you. For everything. Thank you, he said, pressing a kiss to my temple for giving me something worth fighting for. I fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat and the feeling of being truly safe for the first time in my adult life. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the massive windows and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, I was disoriented, forgetting where I was and how I'd gotten there. Then memory rushed back, the alley, the jacket, Luca's dark eyes, and gentle hands. Good morning, Bella, came his voice from across the room. I turned to see him standing by the windows, already dressed in a fresh suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body. He looked every inch the powerful man Valentina had described, but when he smiled at me, I saw only the gentle stranger who had made me breakfast in my tiny kitchen. How long have you been awake? I asked, stretching luxuriously in the incredibly comfortable bed. A couple of hours, he said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed beside me. I had some business to handle, but I didn't want to leave without talking to you first. What kind of business? The kind that ensures you remain safe, he said diplomatically. Sarah, I need to go out for a few hours today, but Valentina is going to come by and keep you company. Maybe show you some of the family properties, help you understand more about our world. Is that her job? Being a tour guide for your... What am I exactly? You're mine, he said simply, his hand coming up to stroke my hair. What we call you isn't important. What matters is that you're under family protection, and that makes you family. Your family moves fast. We have to, he said with a slight smile. In our business, hesitation can be fatal. When we decide someone matters, we act on it immediately. And you've decided I matter. I decided that the moment you offered me your jacket, he said. Everything since then has just been confirmation. He leaned down to kiss me softly, and I marveled again at how gentle he could be. How someone allegedly capable of violence could touch me like I was made of spun glass. Will you be safe today? I asked when he pulled away. I'm always careful, he assured me. And after yesterday's resolution of our problem, I expect things to be much quieter. You killed them all, didn't you? The people who were after you. I eliminated a threat, he said without apology. It's what any man would do to protect his woman, his woman. The possessiveness in those words should have frightened me. Instead, they sent warmth spreading through my chest like liquid sunshine. I'll be back by evening, he promised, standing and straightening his tie. And tonight, if you're feeling up to it, I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere special. Like a real date? Like a real date, he confirmed with a smile that made my heart flutter. Assuming you're interested in dating a man like me, I think I could be persuaded, I said, matching his smile with one of my own. After Luca left, I spent the morning exploring my temporary home more thoroughly, marveling at details I'd missed the day before. The bathroom had heated floors and a shower with enough jets to wash a small car. The walk-in closet was larger than my entire apartment had been, and it was now filled with clothing in my exact size and perfect colors for my complexion. Valentina arrived around noon, dressed in elegant casual clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She brought lunch from what she claimed was the best Italian restaurant in Chicago, along with a warmth and easy companionship that made me understand why Luca was so protective of his family. "How are you feeling about all this?" she asked as we shared incredible pasta and wine that tasted like liquid gold. "Overwhelmed," I said honestly. "Yesterday I was worried about paying my electric bill. Today I'm wearing designer clothes and eating food that probably costs more than I used to make in a week. Money is just a tool," Valentina said philosophically. "What matters is how it's used and why. Is that the family philosophy?" "Part of it," she said. "We believe in taking care of the people we love, in using our resources to protect and provide. Luca's very good at that. Valentina, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How dangerous is this life, really? I know you said there are rules about civilians, but what happens to the women who get involved with men in your family? Do they ever have normal lives?" Valentina set down her wine glass and studied me for a moment. "That depends on the woman and the man," she said finally. "Some of our wives have very traditional lives. They raise children, manage households, stay away from business matters entirely. Others are more involved, more aware of what their husbands do to keep the family safe. And which type do you think I am?" "I think you're the type who needs to understand what she's getting into," she said with a knowing smile. "You're too intelligent to be happy being kept in the dark, too strong to accept protection without knowing why it's necessary. Is that why you told me so much yesterday? About the family business?" "I told you because you deserve the truth," she said. "And because Luca, for all his good intentions, sometimes tries to protect people from realities they're strong enough to handle. What else should I know?" Valentina leaned back in her chair, studying me with those dark eyes that were so like her cousin's. "You should know that the Torino family takes care of its own, but that loyalty is expected in return. You should know that there will be times when Luca has to do things you might not approve of, and that questioning him in front of others would be seen as disrespectful. You should know that this life comes with incredible privileges, but also incredible responsibilities." "What kind of responsibilities?" "Family functions, charity events, being the kind of woman who reflects well on the Torino name," she explained. "Learning to navigate social situations where everyone knows who you are and what that means. Understanding that your behavior reflects on Luca and on all of us." "That sounds terrifying." "It can be," Valentina admitted. "But Sarah, I've watched my cousin with other women over the years. I've seen him try to find someone who could understand and accept this life. You're the first one who's made him think it might actually be possible." "Why me?" "Because you see the man instead of the reputation," she said simply. "Because you offer kindness to a stranger without expecting anything in return. Because when you look at Luca, you don't see power or danger, you see someone worth caring about." After lunch, Valentina took me on what she called the Grand Tour, a drive through Chicago that showed me a side of the city I'd never seen before. We visited Torino family businesses, restaurants where the staff treated Valentina like royalty, construction sites where work stopped when she appeared, Office buildings where her name opened doors that stayed closed for ordinary people. "This is what we've built," she explained as we stood in the lobby of a gleaming skyscraper in the financial district. "4 generations of hard work and smart investments. It's impressive," I said, meaning it. "How much of it is legitimate?" "Most of it," she said. My great-grandfather understood that the future lay in legitimate business, not in the old ways. We've spent decades transitioning the family toward respectability, but not all of it. "No," she said honestly. "Not all of it. There are still aspects of the business that require different approaches, but less and less every year. Is that what Luca is working toward? Complete legitimacy?" "That's what he dreams of," she said. "A future where his children won't have to look over their shoulders, where the Torino name is associated with business success instead of old stories. And the people who tried to kill him? They don't want that future. They profit from the old ways," Valentina explained. "Fear, violence, intimidation, those are tools they understand and depend on. Luca's vision threatens their power." As we drove back toward the hotel, I found myself thinking about Luca's dreams, about the kind of future he was trying to build. It sounded like something worth fighting for, worth the risks and dangers that came with challenging the status quo. "Valentina," I said as we pulled up to the palazzo, "if I decide to stay, to try to make this work with Luca, what happens next?" "Next, you learn to be a Torino woman," she said with a smile. "Which means learning to be strong enough to stand beside a strong man, smart enough to be a true partner, and brave enough to face whatever comes. Do you think I can do that?" "I think you already are," she said. "You just don't realize it yet." Luca returned that evening looking tired but satisfied, like someone who had accomplished difficult but necessary tasks. He found me in the sitting area, reading one of the books that had appeared among my new possessions, and the way his face lit up when he saw me made my heart do that fluttering thing again. "How was your day, Bella?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch and pulling me against his side like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Educational," I said, breathing in his scent, cologne and something uniquely him that made me feel safe and protected. Valentina showed me some of the family businesses. "What did you think?" "I think your family has built something impressive," I said honestly. "I also think I'm beginning to understand why someone would want to stop you from changing things." Something dark flashed across his features. "They won't stop anything," he said with quiet certainty. "That threat has been eliminated permanently. Is it over then? The danger?" "For now," he said. "There will always be new challenges, new threats, but the immediate danger to you has been resolved." "Does that mean I can go back to my normal life?" He tensed slightly, his arm tightening around me. "Do you want to?" I thought about my tiny apartment, my exhausting job at the diner, the loneliness that had been my constant companion for so long. Then I looked up at Luca's face, at the hope and fear warring in his dark eyes. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I do." Relief flooded his features, transforming his entire expression. "Are you sure?" "Sarah, once you fully commit to this life, to me, there's no going back to the way things were." "I know," I said, "and I'm scared, but I'm also excited, maybe. For the first time in years, I have something to look forward to." "What's that?" "You," I said simply. "You, whatever this could become." He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs stroking gently over my cheekbones. "I promise you won't regret this decision," he said fiercely. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you're happy, safe, loved." "Loved?" "Loved," he confirmed, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because I do love you, Sarah. I know it's too soon. I know it doesn't make sense. But I love everything about you." "I love you too," I whispered back, the words feeling right and true and inevitable. "I love the way you look at me, the way you make me feel like I matter." "You do matter," he said. "You matter more than anything." When he kissed me this time, it was different, deeper, more passionate, filled with promise and possibility. I lost myself in the feeling of his mouth on mine, his hands in my hair, The way he held me like I was precious beyond measure. I made dinner reservations, he said when we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard. But I think I'd rather stay here with you. We can stay in, I agreed, not wanting to share him with the outside world just yet. But I want you to tell me more about your dreams for the future. About the changes you want to make. Why? Because if I'm going to be part of this family, I want to understand what we're building together. The word "we" seemed to hit him like a physical blow. We, he repeated wonderingly. I like the sound of that. So do I admitted. So tell me about our future, Luca Torino. Tell me about the world you want to create. As we settled in for the evening, room service dinner, wine, and long conversations about dreams and possibilities, I realized that somewhere in the space of 48 hours, I had stopped being Sarah Chan the waitress and had become someone entirely new. Someone who mattered to a powerful man, someone worth protecting, someone who could contribute to building a better future. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unlike anything I had ever imagined for my life. It was also, I realized, as Luca's arms tightened around me and he pressed kisses to my temple, absolutely perfect. One more thing, I said as we prepared for bed that night. What's that, Bella? I want my jacket back. He laughed, rich and warm and delighted. It's yours, he promised. Everything I have is yours. I just want the jacket, I said, smiling up at him. It started all this. No, he said softly, you started all this. The jacket was just an excuse to fall in love with the most incredible woman I've ever met. As I fell asleep in his arms for the second night, I thought about fate and chance and the strange way life could change in an instant. 2 days ago, I had been nobody special, invisible and struggling and alone. Tonight, I was treasured, protected, loved by a man who would move mountains to keep me safe. All because I had given my jacket to a freezing stranger at 3 a.m. All because sometimes when you extend kindness to someone who needs it, the universe gives you everything you never knew you wanted in return. 3 months later, I stood in the bathroom of what was now our penthouse suite, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test and wondering how to tell the most powerful man in Chicago that he was going to be a father. The world had changed so much since that night in the alley. I was no longer the frightened waitress who worried about electric bills and ate ramen for dinner. I was Sarah Torino now, at least unofficially, until the wedding Luca was planning for next month. I was a woman who wore designer clothes without thinking twice about the cost, who attended family dinners where business was discussed in careful code, who had learned to navigate the complex social world of Chicago's Italian-American families. Most importantly, I was a woman who was deeply, completely, irrevocably in love with a man who treated me like I was the most precious thing in his world. The bathroom door opened and Luca appeared in the mirror behind me, his hair still mussed from sleep and his chest bare above silk pajama pants. Even after 3 months of waking up beside him, the sight of him still made my breath catch. "Good morning, Bella," he said, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind and nuzzling my neck. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said, trying to keep my voice normal as I slipped the pregnancy test behind my back. "Bad dreams?" he asked, concern immediately coloring his tone. The nightmares had been frequent in the early weeks. Flashbacks to that night in the alley and fears about the dangerous world I'd entered. Luca had held me through every one, whispering reassurances in Italian until I fell back asleep. "No bad dreams," I assured him. "Just ... thinking." "About what?" I turned in his arms, studying his face, the strong jaw, the dark eyes that could be coldly dangerous with others but were always warm and gentle with me, the mouth that whispered endearments and promises and made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. "About the future," I said. "About what comes next. What comes next is our wedding," he said with a smile that never failed to make my heart race. "And then our honeymoon in Italy, where I can show you where the Torino story began. And after that? After that, we build the life we talked about. Clean businesses, legitimate enterprises, maybe someday children who won't have to worry about the shadows their father's name might cast. How do you feel about someday becoming sooner? I asked quietly. He frowned slightly, not understanding. What do you mean? Instead of answering, I brought the pregnancy test out from behind my back and held it up between us. For a moment, he just stared at it, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes widened, his gaze flying to meet mine. Sarah, he breathed. Are you? We're having a baby, I said, and even though I'd been the one to take the test, hearing the words out loud made them feel real for the first time. For a long moment, Lucas stood frozen, his dark eyes moving between the test and my face as if he couldn't quite process what I was telling him. Then, suddenly, he let out a whoop of joy that probably woke everyone on our floor. A baby, he said wonderingly, his hands moving to frame my face. We're having a baby. Are you happy? I asked, suddenly uncertain. We talked about children in abstract terms, but this was very real and very immediate. Happy? He laughed, spinning me around the bathroom until I was dizzy and giggling. Bella, I'm ecstatic. You've just given me everything I never dared to hope for. It's still early, I warned as he set me down and dropped to his knees, placing his hands reverently on my still flat stomach. Anything could happen. Nothing will happen, he said with the absolute certainty that had drawn me to him from the beginning. This baby is a Torino. We're survivors. What if it's a girl? Then she'd be the most protected little princess in Chicago, he said without hesitation. And the most loved. And if it's a boy? Then he'll grow up to be better than his father, Lucas said quietly. He'll inherit a legitimate empire, not one built on fear and violence. He'll have choices I never had. He'll have both his parents, I said, running my fingers through Lucas' dark hair. He'll grow up knowing he's loved and wanted, just like his mother should have, Lucas said, rising to his feet and pulling me close. Sarah, I want to marry you tomorrow. Today, I don't want our child born outside the protection of marriage. Luca, the wedding is already planned. Your family is expecting ... full quotes. My family will understand, he said firmly. This changes everything. This makes you even more precious than you already were. I'm not more precious because I'm pregnant, I protested. I'm the same person I was yesterday. No, he said, his hands moving to rest protectively over my stomach. Yesterday, you were the woman I loved more than life itself. Today, you're the mother of my child, the future of my bloodline, the keeper of everything that matters to me. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of love, he corrected. And protection and devotion and every resource I have at my disposal. I thought about the frightened waitress who had offered her jacket to a stranger 3 months ago, who had been terrified of the electric bill and worried about having enough money for groceries. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, this love, this future full of possibilities. I love you, I told Luca, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him softly. All of you, dangerous reputation and all. And I love you, he replied against my lips. Both of you now. We should call Valentina, I said. Tell the family. Later, Lucas said, lifting me effortlessly and carrying me back toward our bedroom. Right now, I want to celebrate with my beautiful, brilliant, pregnant fidanzita. Fidanzita? Fiancée? He translated with a grin. Though after today, I'm thinking Mogli sounds even better. Wife, I said, testing the Italian word on my tongue. Mrs. Luca Torino. I love the sound of that, he said, settling me gently on our bed as if I were made of fine crystal. Almost as much as I love you, as he kissed me with a tenderness that spoke of wonder and reverence and joy. I marveled at how completely my life had transformed. From invisible waitress to beloved woman to future mother, all because I had chosen kindness over caution in a Chicago alley at 3 a.m. No regrets? Luca asked against my lips as if he could read my thoughts. None, I said honestly. Not a single one, even though I turned your quiet life upside down? Especially because you turned my quiet life upside down, I corrected. You gave me everything I didn't know I wanted. What's that? Love, I said simply. Safety. A future worth looking forward to. A family. Our family, he said, his hand returning to rest over the place where our child was growing. The next generation of Torinos started with an act of kindness in an alley. Started with a jacket given to a freezing stranger. Started with a woman brave enough to see a person in need and help him, regardless of the consequences. Lucky for both of us that I was working a late shift that night. Luck had nothing to do with it, Lucas said with absolute certainty. It was fate, Bella, destiny. The universe making sure we found each other exactly when we needed to. And now? Now we build the future we dreamed about, he said. Clean businesses, legitimate enterprises, and children who grow up knowing they're loved and safe and free to be whatever they want to be. Even if they want to be doctors? Especially if they want to be doctors, he said with a smile that held all the love and hope and possibility in the world. Though I have a feeling they'll choose to be whatever allows them to help people, just like their mother. As we lay together in the golden morning light streaming through our windows, Luca's hand protective over our growing child and his voice soft in my ear as he whispered plans and promises and endearments in Italian, I thought about the strange beauty of unexpected love. 3 months ago, I had been nobody special, invisible and struggling and alone. Today, I was everything special to the right person, loved, cherished, protected, and carrying the next generation of a family that had claimed me as their own. All because I had given my jacket to a freezing man at 3 a.m. All because sometimes, when you choose compassion over self-preservation, the universe rewards you with everything you never knew you needed. All because love, real love, can begin in the most unlikely places and transform even the most ordinary person into someone extraordinary.